Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We appreciate you following us on social media, DMW Podcast on Twitter, Dead Men Walking Podcast everywhere else, and visiting the website, dmwpodcast.com, where you can buy some merch and support the show. The All Fuss, No Huss t-shirt is selling like crazy. We just sold 10 of those this week, so they're getting popular. And listen, before you say anything, I understand we're using the American spelling and pronunciation of his name. It's because we wanted some symmetry in the all Huss, No Fuss. We wanted it to rhyme. Okay, we get it. It's John Hus in other countries, but guess what? That's what you get. And we do appreciate you supporting the show. But first, I want to tell you who the show's supported by. These kind of things, we don't do this to make money, but when we have show sponsors, it helps with equipment. It helps with going to conferences like Fight, Laugh, Feast and G3 and Shadows to Substance and things like that, bringing you that content. It's your business, your legacy. Don't partner with just anyone. You need people you can trust. You got to go to Page 50. Guys, Page 50 are believers, distinctly Christian company, and that means they do things a little bit differently. Page 50 is committed to providing quality marketing services to all of their clients and customers. They're going to help you make the most of your social media platforms, create content, and elevate your website so you can grow your impressions and reach your goals. They treat each of their clients' account just like their own because they're all about building things that last. From web design to social media management, from consulting to execution, from search engine optimization to grassroots campaigns, it's their desire to help your business tell its story to the widest audience possible. Go visit www.page50.com. That's Page 50 spelled out, Pagefifty. And see how these brothers in the Lord can help your business. Just click through the link at the bottom of this episode. Integrity, innovation, results, Page 50. And frankly, do we have to say www anymore? You know, can we just say page? I mean, I say it every time and it just seems clunky. But guys, we do appreciate our sponsors. And if you're interested in being a sponsor of the show, reach 100,000 people a month in your specific market. We can send you numbers and what we do. And we do appreciate that it does work. Now that the business is out of the way, let's get to the meat of the show because I'm excited about this one. This guy, he's originally from New Hampshire. He's a father of four sons and husband to Brittany, Presbyterian by confession, but member of a local Baptist church. We might have to touch on that because I was on that same thing too. He's also owner of a non-woke staffing and recruiting business. I love it. You can find him on YouTube at AD Robles and his self-titled podcast on the Fight, Laugh, Feast network. He's the agent provocateur of social media. It's Mr. AD Robles. How are you, sir?
I am well. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Listen, we wanted to have you on because, you have a large following both on social media and with your podcast. You speak the truth. You talk about things that a lot of people don't want to talk about, or if they do, Christians shy away from because it's touchy subjects. And we've been rolling this around in the podcast with different people. We had a few people on it, about a year ago, talking about Christian nationalism, theonomy, things like that. But they didn't really get into maybe what we wanted to get to on the podcast. They were great guests, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to talk to you about that because you seem to be a leading proponent in that. You kind of have your you have your thumb kind of to the pulse of what's going on there.
Sure.
And it's only because you're getting attacked every 15 seconds on social media. So, when people are attacking you, I think that's a good sign of that you're in the pulse of what's going on there. But for our listeners that don't know you, because it's first time on the podcast, can you just give us a little bio of yourself? I know I announced 100%. A little bit there, but tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into it.
So I am no expert on Christian nationalism, but I have been talking a lot about it. The reason why people know who I am is because I started talking about the woke church stuff right at the very beginning. There was that MLK 50 conference, there was that T4G conference when everyone kind of came out as super woke, and I started doing a little bit of content, just to kind of almost like just to gather my own thoughts about it. To be honest, I didn't expect anyone to care except for my mom, maybe. But the thing was that since very few people were talking about it at the time, there were few people, but very few were. Some of it took off, you know what I mean? And And
Yeah.
so I was kind of known as sort of like the anti-woke church proponent. I would review videos and stuff like that. And kind of as the years went on, I like, that's still kind of my bread and butter. That's still what I like to do the most. But, you know, when COVID happened, I started talking about the government and justice, and all of these topics are sort of related. And so that's what I do. You know, I do it on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. You mentioned the podcast, of course. I love being a part of that network. It's awesome. You know, I do a lot of antagonistic kind of stuff on Twitter, but my videos are not like that always. It's mostly trying to be as helpful as I can be, trying to be as straightforward as I can be, talking about woke church, government, things like that.
Yeah, so I was just talking to a mutual friend a few days ago. I think you might know him, Joel Webbin. And
I love them.
and you came up and we just said, you know, sometimes you always just have these guys that are front runners in a certain subject that then allow everyone else a couple years later, maybe 6, 8 months later, to then come out and go, okay, now I'm kind of, now that the pioneer, the trailblazer has broken this ground,
Mhm.
I can come in and go, see, I was this way the whole time. And I'm not trying to demean anyone that has a certain position on that, but I've seen it happen time and time again within the church, to where it does take a certain person to kind of be out there, you know,
Yeah.
trailblazer, so to speak, plod the ground, break it up, and go, look, we have to be talking about these things. And you were talking about the woke church years and years ago. And now it seems to be all these kind of more moderate leaders come out and go, oh yeah, we can't have that. And it goes very much like Avadi talking about cultural Marxism 8 years ago. And then 2 years ago, it was like, oh yeah, where's this been our whole life? It's like, well, he's been talking
Yeah.
about it for almost a decade. So we need those type of people. And sometimes you have to cut through, and you can tell me if you disagree with this, but sometimes I feel you have to cut through with a little bit of a cutting tone. It can be a
Yeah.
little, antagonizing, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
I think sometimes Christians forget that there was a prophet called Elijah that would say, hey, maybe your God's
Sure.
sitting on the toilet. Maybe you need to cut yourself a little deeper and yell a little louder, and then maybe your God will answer you. And he's using a tone there of indignant righteousness, I would say. So I would say you're kind of in that category in my mind. Now, maybe you don't think so, but that's where I see it. You know,
I didn't start out that way, and honestly, like, I was very uncomfortable with that. You know, but believe it or not, I don't like I don't like conflict. You know, I'm like everybody. I'm a little uncomfortable with it. My blood pressure goes up, and I'm just not quite so sure of myself. No. I mean, some people like getting into fights, but most people don't, right? But
yeah,
the difference is that over time, I kind of realized that I do have the ability to live in that discomfort. And so I don't want to fight, but I will fight. You know what I mean? And so I've kind of embraced that role. You use the example of Elijah. That's a great example. My favorite is Nehemiah and Ezra, because they operated at the same time. They were kind of dealing with the same issues, but they took totally different approaches. And God commends them both. And Nehemiah is just such a beast. Like, he's a layman like myself. I recently found that out. I didn't realize that. I assumed he was a prophet or something. He wasn't. He was just a layman. And he gets to business. You know what I mean? He's a barbarian. And some people need that approach. And that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of people that hate my approach, and it's not their cup of tea, and that's totally fine. I don't have any problem with people like that, because for every person that can't deal with my approach, they're going to be helped by someone who's more studious and more Ezra and more, I'm a priestly scholar kind of thing. But the thing is, though, there are a lot of people that do need to be smacked in the mouth from time to time. And so if I have to be like that, sometimes I'll be that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's get into kind of what we wanted to talk about here, because I want to get your opinion on something. I'm not an expert, and I'm not saying you are either, but I'm not as well versed as I'd like to be.
Don't put that evil on me, man.
Okay, I'm not putting that evil on you. Sorry, that's setting the expectation too high. But I'm not as well versed in the whole Christian national movement as much as I would like to be. I've always just kind of thought of myself as a general equity theonomist, right? Westminster kind of, and left it there. I see the problem, and maybe you agree or disagree, but first of all, the problem is we have like 9 definitions of what Christian nationalism is. It feels like I got like 10 streams. Everyone's in a different stream. What do you say the definition? What is your definition, or what do you think I guess the question is, what's the most popular definition right now? And that could even depend on what group is pushing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the definition of Christian nationalism in your mind?
So full disclosure, it's based on what you just said. Probably you and I would see eye to eye on most things. For a long time, I just was content calling myself a theonomist, and I didn't really care. A lot of people didn't know that about me because of my prior content. I'm not like one to use complex theological terms or even simple theological terms. I don't really use the terms, not because I'm hiding from them. It's just not. That's not how I communicate, right? So a lot of people, when they found out I was a theonomist, that day I lost a lot of subscribers because that's heresy and they know it, even though everything I said they agreed with when they didn't know I was a theonomist, right? So that's what I am. I'm a theonomist. I make no bones about it. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Christian nationalism. So a lot of people are pointing out the fact that there's really no clear definition and all of this kind of thing. And they point to that as potentially a weakness. And I think that if you stay there, if there's no eventual sort of statement that we can all kind of sign up on, then yeah, I think that is a negative. But for right now, I think it's a positive. Right now, as far as I see it, Christian nationalism is a way to have a bigger tent for the ideas that you and me as theonomists would probably agree with. We believe, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I would assume you believe that the civil governing authority is a servant of God, and they should be self-consciously trying to serve God the way God has told them that they're supposed to be serving him, right? It's God's rules. It's not theirs. And so that doesn't mean you take Leviticus and turn it into the Constitution, but it does mean that you should look to Leviticus to figure out, how we should be ruling and reigning, and which of those laws, can we bring into our modern context? Which ones need to stay there? Like all that kind of stuff. These are the conversations that a good, righteous, just civil governing authority should be having.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily all Christian nationalists believe that, but they do believe a form of that, at least at a basic level, that it would be a good thing for a government to be Christian. And so, you're going to find all kinds of nuance there and differences, but bare bones, we want to have an explicitly, self-consciously Christian government that's not like the way Joe Biden's a Catholic who's never done a Catholic thing in his life after age 40, probably. That's not what we're talking about. But someone who's every single day, like, what would God have me do today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In the issue I have here, and I'm going to put a theory out there, or what I think I've seen, and you tell me what you think. And it irritates me to no end because I see the Western Christian church do this continuously, is we had a hot button issue or a hot button word like Christian nationalism introduced, a book written, a couple books written, everyone's talking about it. And instantly the pagan and secular circles come in, and the far right does something to it, the far left does something to it, and starts to redefine it, attaches certain things to it, and then the church, instead of being proactive, is reactionary and now fighting among itself. And we're allowing the secular world to define the term Christian nationalism. You have it's all neo-Nazis on the far right. That's what Christian nationalism is. And then on the left, Christian nationalism is going to be a theocracy and it's fascism and all these things. And the church just goes, or the church leaders then infights with itself to try to pull back that definition and just saying something like you said and going, no, that's not the definition at all. And once again, we're playing defense instead of offense. And it's very irritating. And I've seen it happen in this Christian nationalism space as well, too, to where secular groups are wanting to define it, to almost accuse believers of, well, this is what you really mean by this. Is that something you're seeing too?
So this is, I don't know the whole timeline of this because this is not really, that's why I say I'm not an expert, because I don't study like the exact timelines here. But as far as I remember, it started as a pejorative. From the secular team. So, and I don't mean that the term itself was invented by them, but when we started hearing about it, everybody started hearing about it. It was instantly a pejorative. And it was very clear to me from the beginning that any attempt to bring your faith into the government in any way, even if it's as basic as, look, We should ban abortion because the Lord says you shouldn't murder, and the Lord looks at that fetus and declares it a life, and it's got its own personality. I mean, science even says so. And because God does not allow for murder with impunity, that's why we should ban it. That will be called Christian nationalism, of course. And so I instantly knew that, this is the thing. So anything a Christian does that's self-consciously Christian in government will be called it. And let's just break up this term real quick. They say this is this horrible thing. They think it's Nazis, whatever they think, whatever. Who knows what they were saying at the beginning? But Christian's good, nationalism's good. This is a good term. I mean, if they could say whatever they want, let's use this one, because I think it's not, I think before long, most people will recognize that Christian nationalism, it doesn't really mean that to the pagans. They just are opposed to Christianity. They're going to drop the nationalism, just be opposed to the Christianity part. And they already are, you know what I mean? They're already opposed. That's where they're at. So I think it's been a pejorative since we started talking about it, but I think it's a stupid pejorative because the thing itself is actually a good thing that they're against. And I think we can take that term and we can use this to our advantage, because lots of people, I think, prefer the idea of a Christian society as opposed to the insanity that we currently have.
Yeah. And it's weird because up until maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, growing up in the 80s, I would hear all the time when we watched very little TV. I was one of those legalistic 80s Christians, right? Like 2 hours of TV a week and everything was from Satan. But anyway, we would watch things like a president's speech or something like that. And I would hear presidents and senators, this is a Christian nation. This is a Christian. Now, I haven't heard of that much in the last 15 years, even Obama and Trump and those things. But we were always saying this is a Christian nation built on Christian, right? So isn't Christian nationalism just kind of flipping that and saying, yeah, we're a Christian nation? And two, I would say, boy, if you get into the Bill of Rights, into the Constitution, and we actually followed those documents, okay? I'm not talking about what we do now in politics and in the judicial branch and in the legislative branch. You'd be pretty darn close. And if you look at the founding fathers' writings, you'd be pretty darn close to a model of Christian nationalism. There'd be some exceptions there that we'd have to tweak. Yeah. But boy, when this country was founded, I would say we were pretty close, and now we've skewed very far off of that. So maybe
it hasn't worked out for us right so far, because all of, when Barack Obama says God bless America, or if Bill Clinton or George Bush or whoever says this is a Christian nation, obviously they didn't rule that way. They didn't reign that way. You know what I mean? Because they were at the helm as, myriads and myriads of babies were just offed for no reason. So you can say that all you want, but obviously most people recognize that was pretend. So, but the thing was, though, that when it was pretend, at least, there was some cover for a lot of the evil that was going on, right? Well, we're still a Christian nation, and they're still pretending. Barack Obama, most people forget this, but Barack Obama was still pretending to know what marriage was when he was elected. He ran that way. But the mask is off now. It's completely off. Everyone can see the demons on the inside now. So, I'll say this, one thing I wanted to mention, that I have a family member who's an unbeliever, right? Solid head on his shoulders, but an unbeliever, and not the kind of guy that when you see him, he's just very gruff, and you would not expect him to say what he said the last time we had Thanksgiving together. And what he said was that he was talking about the trannies and all of this kind of thing. And he's like, well, you take prayer out of school and this is what happens. And I'm like, who are you? Like, what are you talking about? Take prayer. I agree. I mean, of course, but like, where did you get that? And the thing is, this is what people on the work sites, at the construction sites, they're talking about this kind of, they're not even Christians. I mean, they grew up in a church probably, but they don't love the Lord, but they can recognize that something has gone severely wrong. And if they were king for the day, even as they're not Christian, they'd be like, maybe we should put prayer back in church, because they much prefer that, even though they don't like that. They much prefer that than to having to worry that their kid's teacher is going to convince them to cut their penis off.
No, absolutely.
it's like the mask is totally off now. And I think that, we have an opportunity not to turn the clock back, but to stop pretending, right? To actually, consider what we should do according to God's rules, according to his reality.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if that even puts us maybe in comparison to a righteous, holy, and just God who says, "I'd rather you be hot nor cold instead of lukewarm." It always bothered me growing up, the lip service we would give God. God
Oh, of
bless,
course.
this nation. I remember seeing a clip of George Bush, and it was a couple years after 9/11, and it's panned in real close. And he says, "We're going to hunt down those terrorists. We're going to kill every one of them. We'll bomb them until I don't care who it is." And then it pans out and he's on a golf course and he goes, "God bless America. Now watch this drive." And then he just hits his golf ball,
Sure.
and you go,
Sure.
this is, this is how we're using God bless America. And there was many examples, like you said, with Obama too, the fake, but we were giving lip service. I'm wondering if we're moving into this position now to where at least we know the righteous and the wicked,
Sure.
to where, like you said, there's nothing left. I mean, even the guy on the construction site goes, "I don't know anything about Christianity, but I know back, like even in Israel, the Samaritans would say, 'What's going on over there in Israel? They seem to be prospering pretty well.'" Well, they had a moral code that God had given them. They're, and even that blesses the wicked. Ecclesiastes says even the righteous moral law of God can bless the wicked when living in a country obeying God. So, maybe we're to that point now to where at least we're in a position in this country where we go, we hate Christianity, reject everything about God. Maybe that's when we can see reformation and revival, if I can use that term, revival. I don't know, people get weird even when I say revival now. But
let me say this too, and I think that a lot of times people will hear this and they'll know that I'm a theonomist. They'll know you're a theonomist, and they're like, "Well, it's just not realistic." What do you, I mean, come on, that's it's not doable. It's not, you're LARPing, you're not going to ever have a situation where, I don't know where you stand about prisons, but, you bring back, indentured servitude and you start banning adultery. We're never going to get that. Like, it's just LARPing. You're just pretending you can do this. And here's the thing, guys, like I'm a theonomist. I've got a lot of problems with the law out there. I have a lot of problems. However, a lot of what I believe, it's just not realistic in my lifetime to see, a Sabbath law come back to New Hampshire, for example. Maybe there's some areas in the country where Sabbath laws maybe still exist or potentially could exist again, but I'm not worried so much about Sabbath laws. I'm worried about really basic stuff, because right now the challenges that God has given to us to overcome and to defeat, they're simple. They're simple things like, should you be able to kill a baby with impunity? That's simple. And we can make effort. We can make progress on that issue. In fact, we have made progress on that issue. We can make a lot more progress, especially in localities that have a lot of Christians, right? Maybe not, maybe we can't, maybe not, we can't realistically ban abortion in the entire country, but you could maybe in Florida, you could maybe in some of these other places in the Bible Belt. So we should do that. The other one is this gender, the LGBT stuff. These are basic things. These are basic issues that we have, to face here. And a lot of us on the Christian nationalist side have noticed that there's really not that many gays out there. There's really not that many trannies out there. But somehow we're all under tranny law now.
Yeah. So
obviously you don't need a huge number of real Christians to actually implement Christian law. You just need a minority of a very committed, savvy, and just ruthless Christians that are going to be ruthlessly Christian no matter where they are, no matter what their job is, whether they're making movies or they're at the civil governing authority, to all work together to do this. We can do this kind of stuff. You don't need 80. A lot of people think you need to convert everybody to have a Christian nation. You don't. You don't need anything close to that.
Yeah. So this is kind of off the wall here, but I had this thought a few months ago, and it came back in my mind a few days ago. If you go back even 25 years, once again, I'll say in my lifetime growing up, I remember when most stores were closed on Sunday. Walmart wasn't even open on Sundays until I think maybe the late 90s, right? It was a big deal. What? They're going to 7 days a week. So we had this thing where we didn't have a Sabbath law that said, hey, you can't be open, you can't work, can't do these things. But for the first 210 years or 190 years of the country's founding, we just kind of had this idea of the Sabbath is some type of holy day. we shouldn't
Sure.
do business. We shouldn't, run the stock market, things like that. But it wasn't a law. It was just kind of, we, as Christians, we kind of just
The
assumed that would be
consensus.
around
Yeah.
forever. It was a consensus.
Yeah.
So what was that all about? One, like, how did we kind of have this consensus in the secular world? Or was it just because we were more Christian leaning, the business leaders and customers and clients were, and we've gotten away from that? And is that something we go back to? Or is that something you would like to see? Hey, we need to institute a Sabbath law because the pendulum has swung so far the other way now. Maybe we do have to make it a law. Like, that's the way my mind's thinking. I'm wondering, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any problem with that at all. If I was king for 5 minutes, which that's how long my reign would last, because I'd be probably hung right away. But yeah, I would institute Sabbath laws. Basically I would institute any law to make it as easy and as encourage as many people as possible to set aside some time to honor the Lord. And so, our city, like if I was the mayor of New York, I don't know if you guys know this, but when I left New York not that long ago, we're talking 8 years ago or something, you couldn't buy alcohol on Sunday. And you could go to bars, but you couldn't buy it at the store, right? If I was mayor of New York, I'd institute a citywide Sabbath. Obviously, I'm not closing hospitals or anything dumb like that, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like I would do it. And it's like, look,
Sure.
we're gonna set aside some time to honor the Lord. If you don't want to honor the Lord, then don't do it. But the city's going to do it. And I think that encourages people to take a break and to take some time and to think about the Lord and to go to church and to do these things. But listen, that to me, that kind of stuff, we can table that stuff for as long as it takes, right? Like I said, right now, we've got some simple issues that we can all work together and agree on. Whether you call yourself a Christian nationalist or not, if you're a Christian and you're involved in politics, I would assume you would want abortion to be outlawed and criminalized, and for the force of law to be brought against, especially the more excessive parts of the LGBT movement. I think it can be brought against the entire movement, but some of the more excessive ones, we all agree, like the grooming kids and the perversion in the streets and stuff like that. Those are the basic things. There's like basic stuff right now, guys, that Christian nationalists are focused on. I mean, obviously, we've got a laundry list of things, but the basic stuff right now, we can all agree.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I'm what I would say an optimistic Amil, which would probably put me, I lean that way, which would probably put me really close to post mill, honestly, but
Sure.
I'll get there one day. But with that being said, the thing that I see is the longer that the secular society pushes something, the more we give in as a Western Christian church, right? 15, 20 years ago, absolutely not. Nuclear family. You can't have homosexuality. 10, 15 years goes by. Now you have preachers from the pulpit. Hey, 15-minute apology before you say anything. We can't judge, right? Same thing with the trans thing. We're in the middle of that right now. Abortion with pro-life. Now, if you're an abolitionist, you talk to most of the pro-life, and look, I have a lot of experience going to my state legislator. I have a legislative liaison. I'm a locally elected official. I've introduced bills into committee. They don't go to the floor with Republicans who are pro-life. They don't want an abolition bill. They would rather have an 8-week or 15-week bill, which is what's going on in Florida right now. So you see where we get used to some of these secular ideas, and then you see, and I would say the more moderate and woke Christianity churches, and maybe not even true believers, accept it and kind of roll with it. And I'm wondering if 10 years from now we don't see people from the pulpit saying, "Look at you have to accept trans." I mean, if someone's transitioning and they're younger, I'm already seeing the roots of that. There's the sprouts of that in certain progressive churches. I'm hoping in 10 years I don't see that in the more moderate and conservative churches. But that feels, even though I'm optimistic about the future, it feels like that's the trend that we have in this church.
Yeah.
So it's like, in my mind, how do we combat that? Like you're saying, oh, we can get together on these 2 or 3 things. I don't know. I've talked to a lot of conservative, Republican, pro-life people that want nothing to do with abolition. Oh, you can't have criminal charges for the woman or for the man that convinces. And you go, well, is abortion murder or not? And it takes a long conversation to get them back to get them in the mindset of, well, if it's murder, then there has to be equal protection under the law. I'm just taking that one subject.
No, it's a good point. I think it's a good point. And
so it's an uphill battle, I think.
I think it is, but I think it's more of a, so I'm not saying you're wrong, because I think there's a lot of people that fit that exact profile. I would say that the percentages of people in leadership that are visible, that are kind of involved at the legislature, they're involved with the think tanks like the ERLC, or even just our institutions that we would consider more conservative, they're more like that. The person in the pew, though, can be one. The person in the pew gets it. You know what I mean? Like I just said this the other day on Twitter, that the G3 sort of approach against Christian nationalism, where somehow a Christian being nation is not something we should, a nation being Christian is not something we should strive for. That's not going to sell well with the guy in the pew who's worried about his kid's teacher, convincing him to become trans. Like that's not going to compute with them. And the thing is, even if you agree with their perspective, you have to recognize that for the standard person, the average Joe six-pack believer, that's going to be a hard sell. And so I think that, and this is the trick, guys, because, and I personally believe our side of this debate is gaining a lot of ground. I hate to say winning and losing, because I have no idea, but I think we're gaining a lot of ground. We're gaining a hearing because regular Joes don't understand what the heck they're talking about when it's like, well, I mean, like abortion's murder, but of course, I mean, traditionally pro-lifers never punish the mother, but they do understand when a guy like me in a Mets hat says, if it's murder, then the woman's the one paying for it. That's murder for hire.
Yeah,
that makes sense to them. The only person it doesn't make sense to is an egghead. Who went to seminary. Somehow their brains fell out to not get that one. Or the president of the SBC. If you become the president of the SBC, somehow that argument doesn't make sense to you. But to the average person, and this is the thing, guys, this is the masses of people, they're ready for something like this because they're fed up. There's no virtue in losing, right? There's no, like, God doesn't like extend his people out to not kick down the gates of hell. You know what I mean?
Right.
He doesn't do that. He's at the right hand of the Father, and all the enemies are going to be put under his feet. And the last enemy, of course, we know is death, but there's a whole litany of enemies prior to that he's going to gain ground with. And so I think you're right. It's an uphill battle because they have big microphones and we have smaller microphones, but we're gaining ground. There's just no question about it because our arguments are simple. Everyone can understand them. They resonate biblically with so many people. And what ends up happening is we make these arguments and then we get the best thing that the opponents can do is to argue about our tone, or maybe we shouldn't say it that way. And the guy on the construction side, it's like, I don't know. I mean, AD kind of sounded like a sissy to me. I mean, you can hear the guys that I work with, you know what I mean? They don't get it. So I don't mean that to say that obviously the guy in the pew is right and the egghead Christians are wrong. What I do mean to say is that it is an uphill battle, but it's definitely a winnable one. It's a winnable one.
No, I like that. All right. One more question. We'll wrap this up and then we'll do our Fresh 10 segment, which you don't know about. And we hope you stick around for it. So you said if I was king for a day, very quickly, then I would say, if you were king for the day, let's go back to that example. What are you doing with the Constitution and Bill of Rights? Where are you on that span inside of your theological framework on things like the First, Second, Third Amendment, right to privacy, right to bear arms, freedom of religion? Would you dismantle that, tweak it, keep it close to the same?
Yeah.
What are you thinking there, and how does it align with your theology?
So just to answer correctly, like what I would really do if I was king for the day, I would obviously be thinking about sort of where we're at right now and what good I could actually do. Right. There's a very famous Doug Wilson thing that he said that I've never forgotten, but it's a point where he became convinced in himself as the pastor that it was a sin to not provide wine for communion, because he was used to the grape juice, just like every Baptist, right? But he didn't change that overnight. And so he would be there at communion and he would pray for the communion and he'd give his congregation grape juice and he'd pray to God, sorry for this sin I'm about to do. And then he wouldn't say that out loud. He'd say it to himself because he thought it was a sin, but he didn't change it right away. And the reason he didn't change it right away is because he thought that it would do more damage to his people to try to like run roughshod over them when they're not expecting it without like some serious groundwork being laid. So I wouldn't change the Constitution overnight for that reason. If I had my druthers, though, I would change the Constitution. Definitely. I would make it overtly Christian. We would have to put something about Jesus Christ in there. If you look at a lot of state constitutions, they did do that. You know what I mean? They did make overt, even Vermont for I don't know if they changed it yet, but the most pagan state that we have right now specifically references the Lord. You know what I mean? And I would do that for the Constitution. I'd want it to be explicitly Christian. I think that as far as if again, keep it in mind, like doing the right thing for the time. I don't think that non-Christians should be allowed to be elected into office. I do not. I don't think that you should have a test as far as what if they're Baptist, Presbyterian, or something like that. But I don't think that we should make any bones about it. Like if you're an atheist, you can't be in the legislature. If you're a Muslim, you can't be in the. You could live here and you could privately, honor, what you worship, which is a demon, but you can't do that in the halls of our legislature. Like you can't serve your demons in your job in government, because you won't have a job in government.
So
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so Reformed Baptists can only raise to the level of state house. Only Presbyterians in the Congress. Sorry, go ahead.
Listen,
you were talking seriously. I made a dumb joke.
No. It's fine. It's fine, because obviously people will think about that too. Like, oh, eventually you're gonna, you know what? So here's what I say about that kind of stuff. Let's cross that bridge when we get there. I think the more nuanced stuff, we could talk about it later. Right now, we're still figuring out if it's okay to kill babies or not. Like, I don't think we necessarily need to hash out every detail to decide on that one. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
bigger fish to fry.
There we go. We got bigger fish to fry right now. So that's not the challenge that God has put before us today. We got another thing about Christian nationalism. I'll say this real quick, because I know I'm kind of taking over the conversation, but
no, that's why you're here.
One thing I've seen with Christian nationalists is a willingness to face things as they are. Reality, like what we have right now. Like, would it be great if we could have this wonderful republic where everyone is just voting as a Christian, and you don't have to have any, you don't have to, listen, that's not the hand we've been dealt. We've been dealt a hand where people in our legislatures, are totally fine with making a law to take your children away, to mutilate them against your consent. Like, we're not dealing with normal circumstances. These are demons, right? And so it's like, well, what do you think they should do, an executive order to end, whatever it is? Maybe if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. You know what? Ideally, you shouldn't pull people's beards out, but Nehemiah did that, and God approved of it. You know what I mean? Ideally, you shouldn't have to do that, right? You shouldn't beat your brethren for intermarrying with pagans. You shouldn't do that ideally. But you know what? It needed to happen, and Nehemiah was ready to go. And I'm sure I feel like a kindred spirit with Nehemiah. I'm not going to lie. Like, he's like praying to God, and he's like, all these things that like you would want to hide from people. He's like saying, God, please remember me. Remember that time when I pulled their beards out and I beat them. Remember me favorably. And like, I'm probably reading too much into this, but I sense this sort of like a weird uncomfortability there. He's like, I did that for you, so please give me the favorable. You know what I mean? Like, he kind of knows maybe you shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? Anyway, so I don't even remember what we're talking about there, but I think like it's a good point. Like the Baptist Presbyterian thing, like those are issues that eventually need to be hashed out and talked about, and maybe we'd have like a nation where there's like states that are overtly Baptistic or whatever. I don't know what it would look like. This is not, but right now we're dealing with such basics. Like you've heard the story of the guy whose trans surgery went bad and he died on the table. It's like, we don't have to figure out like what denomination is going to be the best one in 30 years. Like, we've got bigger fish to fry right now.
No, absolutely. All right. All good stuff. And I know it's very serious stuff. So we're going to lighten it up a little bit. We do a little segment here called Fresh 10, where we ask you 10 rapid fire questions to get to know you a little bit more, so our audience can get to know you. Nothing really theological. Do you want to stick around for about 5 more minutes and play it?
Yes. But is the first question, are you a white supremacist?
Oh, no, but I can add that if you want.
The answer is no.
The answer is no. So, okay, 11 questions. The first one, are you a white supremacist? It's not, but this is AD Robles with Fresh 10. Let's go.
Can we kick that one more time? Let's go. I'm fresh. I'm fresh.
All right, we asked some of our guests, the ones that we are interested in. We're interested in all of our guests, but sometimes I like to ask these questions just to see where they're at. Question number 1, what city and state did you grow up in, and how did it affect your childhood?
Windsor, Connecticut. And I got to know lots of liberals over a long period of time. And that affected me for the rest of my life.
I love it. Question number 2, when playing Monopoly, what is your favorite property to own and why? Are you a Boardwalk Park Place guy, or do you go for those slums?
I know I shouldn't, but I go for the Boardwalk Park Place.
All right. Question number 3. You're in the DeLorean. The flex capacitor is flexing. Are you going back in time to visit your great-great-great-great-grandfather? Or are you going forward in time to visit your great-great-great-great-grandchildren?
Forward.
Going forward like a good post mill. I like it. Question number 4. Who is your favorite actor, dead or alive?
Probably Denzel Washington.
I get that a lot on here. That's crazy.
He's
You're
awesome.
probably 3rd or 4th person. Yeah, people love him.
Question number 5. Totally awesome.
Yeah, question number 5. Top 3 bands or music albums that have influenced your life the most.
Smashing Pumpkins. I don't know. Man. There's a band. There's a Puerto Rican heavy metal band called Puya. And
Puya, huh?
Puya, yeah. And I also really like recently. Hasn't influenced my life. I'm cheating, but recently I've been really into Bob Marley.
Okay. Very interesting. Question number 6. Favorite thing to do when you just want to relax?
Nothing. just hang out and watch the kids play, you know?
That's a great answer. Question number 7. What do people misunderstand about you the most?
I feel like I've already said one, you know, I don't like to fight. Question. I'm uncomfortable. Yeah. But no, I think, real talk though, I do think a lot of people think that I'm kind of like a typical sort of like white Republican sort of. I watch Tucker Carlson, and like I'm none of those things. I've never even watched. I might start watching Tucker now that he's off Fox, but
right.
I've never watched a single episode of Tucker Carlson.
You came on. I said, "Where's your bow tie?" This white conservative right wing, you know. All right. Question number 8. If you could sit down for a cup of coffee with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would it be? And don't you dare say Hitler. Don't start those rumors.
Man, this is a hard question. I don't know. I have no idea.
All right, we'll go. No answer for 8. 9. We got 2 more.
No answer.
All right. At what time of the day are you most creative and get your best work done? You a night person? You a morning person?
Morning for sure. Yeah, early morning.
Morning for sure. All right. Last one. What book outside of the Bible should everyone at least just take a look at? Maybe flip open, flip through. What's a book that, it's a good read no matter where you're at?
I'll tell you right now, I think that everyone should look at the book by it's Rushdoony book, and the title is escaping me. It's called The One and the Many.
Okay, yeah.
It's a Rushdoony book called The One and the Many about the problem of unity versus diversity. It's like a historical book too. It's not one of his most popular, but it's very helpful. You should honestly anything Rushdoony. I think the man was a complete genius. But hey, that's my answer.
There you go. Rushdoony for question 10. That was Fresh 10, guys.
Can we kick that one more time? Let's go. I'm fresh.
The benefit, by the way, to
yeah.
reading Rushdoony. The benefit to reading Rushdoony too is that when somebody finds out you're doing it, they get really worried. Like, well, like there's some issues with Rushdoony. Like, it's good.
Right. He's a reconstructionist. He's the R word. Oh no! All right, throw out the socials there, AD. Let's wrap this up. Where can people find you? I'll make sure I link it up.
You can find me on Twitter, AD Robles Media. You can find me on YouTube. Just type in AD Robles. And then, Fight Laugh Feast Network. If you're subscribed there, I've got a feed there as well. I'm also on gab.com, which I'm a big fan of Gab. Gab, if you want to get to know what my personality is actually like. Twitter, I use it exclusively to antagonize Big Eva, Gospel Coalition types. But on Gab, I've got a lot of wholesome content. There'll be videos of my kids and stuff like that. So yeah.
All right, there you go. Guys, it's AD. We appreciate you taking the time, brother, talking to us a little bit. Guys, thanks for listening to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. We appreciate you sharing with a friend. That's the only way we can grow, bring glory to God. As always, guys, remember, chief end of man is to glorify God. Enjoy him forever. God bless. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dead Men Walking Podcast for full video podcast episodes and clips, or email us at deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuit.